Okay, welcome back to podcast number 5, Podcasting on a Plane, bringing you aviation from both sides of the mic. And since the last episode, I've been doing a lot of thinking about the show and where we can go next. I've been so happy about how well received the podcast has been, and I'm grateful that we live in a time like this where we have a platform like podcasts to share what we know and to help others get to where they need to be. Now, I know you're flying in an airspace that's crowded with podcasts, so I really appreciate you listening to mine. This episode is meant to inspire you to learn more about the background business of aviation and how your understanding of the background stuff can help you succeed no matter where you are on the ladder right now. Something this podcast has already taught me is how many enthusiasts there are out there. There's so many people hiding in the shadows, I guess, and they just live and breathe this stuff. And some of you have reached out to me, and I'm always happy to hear about your passion and to be able to nerd out with you about it. Part of my vision for the podcast involves getting people thinking. I want to inspire you to think about all the ways aviation can be enjoyed and all the ways you can make a living in this business we call aviation. Now, I'm not trying to be an aviation career coach. Carl Valeri does a way better job of that than I ever could. But I want to get you thinking about all the ways you can get involved in aviation and support yourself and your family that way. Then you can call him and he'll coach you to actually pass the interview. So I have an interesting suggestion for getting into the industry, and we're going to talk about that in a couple minutes. My goal, though, isn't to talk you into or talk you out of anything. My goal is just to help people do the right thing for them, because I remember how good it felt when I finally found the right thing for me. And it's not hard for me to remember because I still feel that way every day, and that's how I know I'm in the right place. Now, I've made a lot of mistakes in this business, but I've also had some great successes too. And if I can help you or help anybody get to the right place with less pain than I experienced, then that's a win. I want this podcast to be a place where we discuss the realities of operations in the industry. And maybe a tagline for the podcast could be Aviation, the Real Story, or Straight Talk about the greatest thing ever. And when things don't work out as planned, that's okay, because there's always another opportunity waiting in the wings. That was a joke. Anyway, that's what happened to my first guest. His name's Bill Herron, and Bill contacted me a while ago, and he asked that while I talk about aviation as a career path, that I also promote ATC as a career path. And of course, I'm happy to do that. And the interesting thing about Bill, as you're going to hear, is that he got into air traffic control, but he didn't make it through to certification. But despite that, he still has favorable feelings towards ATC, and not making it in one path did not deter him one bit from his enthusiasm for aviation. He agreed to come on the show and tell us a little bit about his journey. All right, so a few episodes ago, I got a lot of really nice feedback, I should say, from new listeners. And Bill is one that we have with us, Bill Herron, and he was one of the first. And he asked me to promote air traffic control as a career path. And of course, that's for sure something I'll be doing, as well as just about any job that can get someone into aviation in any capacity. But Bill has some ATC experience sort of in the old school in the late 80s, which is a lot different than things are now. And Bill's here to tell us a little bit about it and why someone might want to get into the career field right now. So, Bill, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brandon. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So tell us about how it was that you got interested in aviation in the first place, and then how you ended up joining air traffic control as a potential career path.
Well, I had always been interested in airplanes as a kid. My father traveled a lot in this business, and so there were a lot of times that I went to the airport to pick him up from that. But the first time I really got involved with it was with a group called the Civil Air Patrol. I joined the Civil Air Patrol when I was 13 years old. Civil Air Patrol is an auxiliary of the Air Force. They have a program for kids they call a cadet program. And it was nice because not only do you get exposed to the Air Force and other, types of military things, but you also get exposed to flying. In fact, the cadets are run through an orientation program where they put you in the left seat of a 172 with a pilot, and they let you go up and fly and see what it's like. And, you're not shooting the takeoff and landing by yourself, but being able to do some flying, experience that, somebody that's interested in it, I highly recommend Civil Air Patrol as a way to go. But that was what got me into aviation. I guess around probably 86, I had graduated high school. I was in college, but I wasn't real happy with the way things were going in college. And I don't even remember how I found out about it, but I actually went and took the qualifying exam for air traffic control. Interestingly, I was in Oklahoma City at the time, and my qualifying exam was done at the Murrah building. So that had some experience with that building before, the bombing. But The test at the time, and I think there's a part of it that's still that way, was about spatial relationships. And so what you get is they'd show you a two-dimensional object, and they'd show you 2 or 3 targets and say these are moving, and then they'd say, okay, 5 minutes from now, what do you think it's going to look like? And it's basically, air traffic control on a piece of paper, if you will, being able to look at it and predict what's going to happen. And so I took the test, and I didn't hear anything back. And, a few months later, I was still goofing around the school and got a phone call, and they said, hey, are you still interested in being a controller? And I said, sure. So I started at the FAA Academy. Of course, I was in Oklahoma City, so it wasn't any problem. The academy's right there. I actually lived at home and went to the academy. Started there in October of 1987. At that time, the initial academy processing was called Screen, and Screen was a non-radar environment. So it was kind of like what you had on the pieces of paper. They had a pretend piece of airspace that they called Academy Center, and they had planes that were not moving. I mean, at that point, it was all on paper. It was all fixed. You had to keep the picture in your head. So you'd have a thing that says plane A is here, plane B is here, plane C is here. And then plane A would say, well, I want to change altitude. And you'd have to figure out, okay, is he still going to be protected from B and C when he does that? And in the meantime, they were also training us through the .65, the air traffic control manual, and test on that and so forth. But I passed barely. I think I had the qualifier was like 70, and I had like a 70.5, but I did pass. After that, they gave us the option of whether we wanted to go to Tower or to the center, the air traffic control centers. And I picked Tower, and I was actually assigned to a control tower in Lafayette, Louisiana. And so a couple of more months at the academy to finish up tower control or tower cab training. And then I drove down to Louisiana and worked in the cab there for about 8 months. I qualified on clearance delivery and ground control, and then got into local control, and it was one of those cases where you had to try and remember 12 things at once, and I'd remember 10. And about the second or third time that you forget something, they say, you're a great employee and we like you and everything, but you're not going to make it. And so my air traffic control career lasted about a year.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Well, as you're speaking, a lot of those things sort of are still similar. And then, a lot of them are a lot different. I think right now, one of the biggest differences is that, the attitude towards training is, the quickness to sort of cut someone loose and let them go maybe isn't so quick-handed. For instance, if you see that there's potential, even if they're struggling a lot, I think, maybe you try to work with them a little bit more, just, to give them that little bit extra that they need and really see if they can make it. Because a lot of people, I think, probably may have been cut loose a little too short. But then again, if someone doesn't have it, then, they don't have it. And maybe another part of the FAA would work for them. So what happened afterwards? Did you try to stay in aviation, or did you move on to something else?
Well, I was still a part of the Civil Air Patrol. In fact, at that point, I had become a senior member in the Civil Air Patrol and commissioned as a second lieutenant. And I was working with them while I was in Louisiana and continued to work with them. I was never really, I did flying as a cadet, but as an adult, I didn't do flying so much. I discovered that I had skills in things like administration and communications, and those were the kind of things I worked with. Most of the flying that I did in Louisiana was in the back seat of a Cessna 402, and it had a repeater rig in it that you could relay FM radio signals from the handheld FM radios. And during a mission, we'd put the airplane up in a circle, say over Lake Pontchartrain, north of New Orleans, and use it as a relay for all of the other the handheld radios during search and rescue and so forth. So I stayed in the Civil Air Patrol. I wound up back in Oklahoma, got a bachelor's degree in computer programming, and that's what I've done more or less the past 20, 30 years now, is worked as a programmer. I still keep up with aviation. I've got the flight aware thing on my phone, and I love to travel. I love to fly when I can, commercial travel. But no, never really got to the point where I was ready to go get my license or anything, and just didn't pursue that aspect.
Okay, well, I'm glad that aviation has stayed part of your life through this long, and I really appreciate you reaching out, actually, and wanting to say that even if it didn't work out for you, that you would still recommend it as a career field this many years later for somebody who's coming up in aviation.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many people, the people that I know even now that I used to work with in air traffic control. Of course, it's 30 years later, and they're all getting to the point where they have to retire. It's like the commercial pilots. The air traffic controllers have an age limit. I think it's 56 now.
It is.
And once you get to that point, you can't be an air traffic controller anymore. I mean, you probably can go do administrative or such, but they're not going to let you work the boards anymore. They're not going to let you actually control traffic. And so it is something, I mean, lots of air traffic controllers are pilots. You're an example of that. But it is a field that's going to need people. It's going to need good people, smart people, intelligent people to keep everything moving. And, like the current conversation about whether or not it should be privatized, I just kind of laughed and said, oh, is it time for the ATC privatization talk again? Gee, we haven't had that in a few years. It will remain a good career field for people. And certainly, somebody that loves to fly, you're going to encounter air traffic control anyway. And if you're not, maybe you're not a pilot, but maybe you just like aviation so much, you like flying so much. I want people to think of it as an alternative. I want them to think of it as another career that's out there where they can make a difference, they can make good money, and they can help keep people safe when they're flying.
Well said. I couldn't have said it better myself. And, I really appreciate that you reached out and that you're willing to talk about your experience and still recommend it for, this many years on. It's still very much all you said was true. And it is a great way for people who maybe don't want to be pilots, but want to be in aviation, that want to get up and come out to the airport every day to still be able to do that. Anyway, well, Bill,
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate your comments and you opening up to us in the audience about that. And who knows, maybe we'll have you back again in the future.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me, Brandon. I'm really enjoying your podcast so far. I look forward to each episode when it comes out.
All right. Special thanks to Bill for sharing his experience. Now, aviation is a business, plain and simple. There are very few parts of aviation which exist purely to fill some altruistic cause, right? Money is the final arbiter of what happens in aviation, just like most businesses, and it's often hard to see the realities of business when you've got blinders on, because the airplanes are so cool. Airplanes and aviation seem to have this sort of voodoo power to snake charm us into making sometimes less than stellar life choices just to get our fix, and I'm as guilty as any. If you're truly wanting to get into the industry, though, the first step is just getting a foot in the door, so to speak. There are so many background businesses going on all the time, both at the airport and elsewhere, that support the planes flying. And if you're thinking about a career in aviation, but maybe don't want to be a pilot or a flight attendant or controller or mechanic, start thinking about some of the other things that go on that support aviation in the background, and that'll give you some inspiration. The possibilities really are endless, and no matter what you do in aviation, experience is experience. Get your foot in that door, learn the language of aviation, and then the opportunities will start to present themselves. One of those often overlooked lines of businesses is fixed base operators, otherwise known as FBOs. Now, we'll talk about what FBOs do specifically in a bit, but FBOs and ramp service is actually where I started my career. My very first job in aviation was literally sweeping hangar floors, but I earned that job, and that was a sort of litmus test for my future. At age 15, I had to do an internship in my high school, and the first place that came to mind was the airport. So I did what I had to do because they weren't interested in having a 15-year-old touching $1 million jets. And I think it pretty much came down to going to the airport manager and begging. And luckily it was a small town and that worked. But I talked him into it and he gave me the internship, which eventually turned into a paid gig as a line service guy. I was taught how to fuel, how to tow, how to plow snow, and everything else that happens at an FBO. So a big shout out to Rich. He's the airport manager at Telluride Airport, TEX, and he's actually still there over 20 years later. So if you're ever up in Telluride, say hi for me. The way I see it, if you spend your days happy for the opportunity to clean up a hangar floor, only to have your next duty be to dump the lav of a business jet, but you're knowing that you're starting on the road to one day being the pilot of that jet, or the controller that works it from gate to gate, or the designer for the next generation of aircraft that are going to replace it, then you're probably in the right place. And if you're happy to come back tomorrow only to sweep and clean and fuel just because you're so happy to be at the airport and it's okay with you that you're getting paid mostly in experience points rather than money, then I think you probably have the passion it takes to get successful in this thing that we call aviation. Now, imagine the people that you can meet working at an FBO. These are where the wealthiest people are coming and going. They're not flying on the airlines, right? They're in their private jets, and this is where they get serviced. Now, I know several people who have been offered jobs by the wealthy company owners whose plane they've been servicing. They notice that person's ambition, they notice their customer service skills, and the rest is history, aviation or not. Plus, you learn an immense amount about the true backstory of how things run. And as automation creeps into our industry, learning the business side has never been more important. So if you're looking for a way to get that first bit of experience around airplanes in the airport, but you don't know where to start, my opinion is that working a little line service is by far the best bang for your buck. And the other place you can do it is airlines. Now, it's not quite the same, but if you get a job as a ramp agent or a baggage handler or whatever that airline calls it, you can get a lot of experience touching airplanes and learning how the airline business works too. Now, I've actually done this for 2 separate airlines, and if you can get some airline experience under your belt, that will take you very far. Also, if you're a ramp agent for most airlines, you get flight benefits, people. So flight benefits, aviation experience, and a paycheck. What could be better? So what is an FBO for those of you that aren't pilots? Well, here's a general overview. It's pretty basic, but FBOs are the place at the airport that provides all the little background services that you need to operate an aircraft. They have parking places, they have fuel, they lease office space to small aviation businesses, they provide catering, car rentals, things like that. As a matter of fact, there can be so much money in the FBO business that large chains have formed and placed themselves strategically across the country. They even have negotiated agreements with large business jet operators and loyalty programs aimed at getting pilots to choose their FBO over a competitor at the field. Really, the whole point is there's a lot of competition, and that's the key issue in what's happening at a few airports around the country. Here's an excerpt from an AOPA article that provides some background for what we're going to cover next. Signature, already the largest FBO chain in the world, acquired Landmark Aviation, the 3rd largest chain, in early 2016, giving it approximately 160 locations globally. The next largest chain is Atlantic Aviation, which has approximately 70 locations. Owned by British-based BBA Aviation, Signature paid more than $2 billion for the 68 Landmark locations, which is about 10.6 times Landmark's earnings, which is what one business publication called a significant multiple for an FBO. Landmark had doubled its size the year before when it acquired Ross Aviation, which is part of a growing pattern of FBO chains that are consolidating. A few years earlier, Landmark had acquired Encore Aviation and several independent FBOs. Before approving Signature's purchase of Landmark, the U.S. Department of Justice required Signature to sell 6 locations to buyers approved by the DOJ's Antitrust Division. That was a move to increase competition in airports where Signature and Landmark were already competitors. So if you're looking for a business opportunity, the FBO game might not be it. But if it's a first aviation job you're looking for, I'm sure they need help pumping all that fuel. So while most FBOs are reasonable businesses providing a service, there are always other factors at play. For instance, in any market, a lack of competition typically leads to higher prices. No surprises there. But with so many airports in the country, how could anybody possibly have a monopoly? Well, think back to the article excerpt we just read. The U.S. government had to get involved to ensure that some competition still existed at some airports. At smaller airports, a mom-and-pop type FBO can still exist. But it's at these larger airports where the jet fuel flows like water that the biggest chains try to inhabit. Now, I can't blame anybody for chasing after thousands and thousands of gallons of fuel sales daily. But sometimes the smaller guys get caught up in the mix. Reading my usual aviation news sources, I came across a really interesting article in AOPA. The original piece was from a couple months ago, and it centered upon FBOs charging exorbitant fees for services. Here's a quote. Upon learning that the fees to park overnight at Baltimore-Washington International Airport totaled some $153 and that avgas was $8 a gallon, the pilot of the Piper Saratoga decided to go elsewhere. But he did take time to complete AOPA's online form reporting higher than expected fees. He's just one of hundreds of pilots who sent examples in after AOPA reported earlier this year that he was seeking information on FBO fees that seemed beyond market norms. Pilots responding to AOPA's recent inquiries noticed that in many locations fees shot up considerably after Signature acquired the Landmark locations, and many others over the past few years. Some of the fees that were reported are eye-opening for sure. Few average GA pilots can relate to what it costs to operate a Gulfstream 650, but most will agree that $2,500 to park for 15 minutes while dropping off a passenger at Boston, which is a Signature location, is high even by business jet standards. The same operator paid another $2,500 a few days later to pick up the same passenger. I get that they have overhead to cover, but paying that much money is ridiculous, the corporate pilot reported. But such fees are not exclusive to Signature. A pilot picking up a passenger at Ross Aviation's Scottsdale location was charged $300 for waiting 40 minutes on the ramp. The pilot of a TBM single-engine turboprop reported paying nearly $200 in fees when picking up a passenger at Ithaca Airport in New York. $165 of the fees were for quote-unquote handling, even though the pilot reported being on the ramp for 5 minutes and never shut the engine down. The passenger was not allowed onto the ramp until paying the fees. Now, AOPA is obviously doing their part as a general aviation advocate and lobby organization to keep prices down, however they can for GA pilots, but a few weeks ago they published a letter that was written by the president. His name's Mark Baker, and he wrote that letter to the chairwoman of the Orange County Board of Supervisors about a move that they made to kick a major FBO operator, and in this case it is Signature, out of John Wayne Airport. And that's just up the airway from my airport, in a place where in a former life I flew into all the time. Now, I've been on the receiving end of this specific issue, so here's some background, though. Signature Aviation FBO had had their lease terminated by the Orange County Board of Supervisors, and a different FBO was awarded a lease to replace them. Now, obviously, Signature isn't happy about it, and here's what a Voice of OC, that's the name of the publication, the Voice of OC, and they put out an article that mostly consists of Signature's press release regarding the matter. And it's from April 5th, 2017, titled Signature Flight Support Exits John Wayne Airport. Signature will continue legal challenges to the Orange County Board of Supervisors to challenge the Orange County Board of Supervisors' award of airport leases. The article states, Signature Flight Support, Signature, today announced that as a result of actions by the Orange County Board of Supervisors to terminate Signature's lease to provide private aviation services, that it was vacating its leasehold. Signature is taking this action in order to ensure continuity of their services to its customers, which could be harmed by an interruption. Signature has been implementing a coordinated transition over the past several weeks, and however, Signature is continuing to pursue redress based on lawsuits it filed with the FAA and the Orange County Superior Court. Signature vehemently denies with the actions by the Orange County Board of Supervisors to replace us with an underqualified but politically connected bidder as a provider of private aviation services at the John Wayne Airport. And we are continuing to pursue the reversal of the board's 4-1 actions in the appropriate legal venues, said Jeff Heck. He's the Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Signature Flight Support. He continues, nonetheless, the interests of our loyal customers are best served by vacating their premises now and ensuring that they will continue to have access to the airport as part of an orderly and cooperative transition. End quote. On March 29, 2017, Signature filed petition for a writ of mandate in the Orange County Court by asking the court to reverse the illegal and unwise actions taken by the Orange County Board of Supervisors to replace Signature with ACI Jet. In taking these actions, the Board of Supervisors, they say, used improper criteria, and that was the desire to award one of the 2 available leases to a local as opposed to a national operator, which is a violation of federal laws regarding equal protection for all applicants. Continues on, Jeff Heck, quoted again, says, the Signature continues to have concerns about ACI's ability to safely operate at John Wayne. We previously pointed out that the largest airport that ACI Jet operates out of is San Luis Obispo, with only 11 daily commercial departures versus John Wayne's 126. We also encourage the Board of Supervisors to consider whether ACI Jet has the necessary financial strength to run a large FBO like John Wayne, continues Heck. ACI Jet was not able to present basic audited financials with its statement of qualifications, one of the many serious violations of that process, end quote. And then they have some corporate statements here that say, while Signature Flight Support is departing John Wayne, its customers have numerous nearby options with FBOs at Long Beach, LAX, San Diego, Palm Springs, Santa Barbara, Van Nuys, and Thermal. And Signature will work with its customers to achieve an orderly transition. And that's the end of that article. So suffice to say, they aren't happy. But AOPA seems to be. Again, the president, Mark Baker, he wrote a letter to Michelle Steele, who's the chairwoman of the Board of Supervisors in Orange County, and it's basically thanking her for this choice. He says, on behalf of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, I'm writing to take special notice of the oversight the Orange County Board of Supervisors has exercised as the governing authority of John Wayne Airport, a critical component of the national and local transportation system, which is funded substantially with local, state, and federal funds. The Board of Supervisors' recent actions to guard against crippling and excessive pricing by an FBO at the airport are particularly noteworthy. It is imperative that the governing boards of airports provide rigorous oversight to ensure FBO prices are reasonable, fair, and non-discriminatory. These requirements for FBOs are a major focus for AOPA nationwide, and Orange County serves as a beacon for the entire general aviation community on this subject. In fact, John Wayne Airport is among the top locations we have received complaints about regarding these issues, and I've included one of our recent reports on this topic, which mentions your airport, and appears online and in our monthly AOPA pilot, and that was the article I just read before. AOPA has over 32,000 members in the state of California, and general aviation is an economic engine that contributes almost 140,000 jobs and $30.2 billion in output to the state. But that engine and the nearly 175,000 operations at John Wayne Airport rely on access, and unreasonable prices and fees deter pilots and operators from airports. Please feel free to reach out to us if there's anything we can do, and look forward to working together to protect general aviation and the freedom to fly. Best regards, Mark Baker, President and CEO of AOPA. And that's the end of that one. Crazy. Now, I'm definitely not taking sides on this. I'm just the reporter. But I find it fascinating how much money and politics are at play in what looks like a relatively simple service industry. So there you go. FBOs are a great business, but sometimes a rough one too. And much like AOPA, but for different reasons, of course, I want to hear your stories, or maybe your rants and raves. Do you feel like you've ever been ripped off at an FBO? Or maybe there's an FBO that's just so great that you always stop there instead of going somewhere else, even if it's out of your way. Maybe you pay the price because they have a badass crew car. Whatever your reason, I want to hear what you guys have to say. And if you ever want to get in touch and do some talking off the record, go flying, whatever, get in touch with me. And there's already a few listeners who want to do some hangar flying in Southern California area, and we can probably put a nice little group together from different facets of aviation, and we'll probably get some learning done. Or maybe we'll just go hang out at a bar. I don't know. Either way, I'm sure a lot of ideas will be exchanged. And actually, the first meetup is already in the books. Lots of fun stuff was talked about, good times were had by all, and we did some really great recording and planning for a future episode. This part I'm about to play for you here is a discussion I had with a women in aviation up-and-comer and a fellow San Diegan named Serena. It's like, don't even put the beer down, just hold it.
Yeah, that's exactly my safety beer.
I'm here with Serena Hart, and she contacted me after hearing about my podcast from APG, and she was excited that there was an aviation podcast that was coming out of the San Diego area. And since I think pretty much every other aviation podcast is East Coast based, right?
That seems to be the trend that I'm noticing.
There's nothing out here. It's crazy. So we're going to do our best to change that. So this is our first meetup, hangout, whatever you want to call it. And we're out west and we're doing this. So anyway, we agreed to meet up and do a little recording for everyone. And you have a few things that you wanted to share.
I do. I'm 24 years old. I'm new to the San Diego aviation community, and I've definitely just like dove straight in. And what I'm learning throughout this whole process is the incredibly small world that the aviation community lives in, which is how I found you, and I think it's great that you are so close to San Diego. And it was great to find a fellow APG listener because, I never thought I'd be anyone on the West Coast that listens to them.
That's right.
It's been sad. I feel like a little lonely over here.
What are we going to do? We're out here all by ourselves in the West Coast.
I know, exactly. And I mean, you think you got Captain Nick all the way over in the UK. You'd think that they'd go out west a little bit more, but apparently not. There's no California love.
Bummer.
So, we're sitting here drinking my favorite beer, Belching Beaver Peanut Butter Stout. Unfortunately, it's not an IPA. Sorry, Dr. Steph.
That's right. That's how we do it out west.
Yeah, exactly. And so I've had actually some really exciting news in my life. A week ago now, I was elected to be the Women in Aviation International San Diego Chapter President.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's been quite the ride. I only moved to San Diego, like I said, a few months ago, and I joined this organization and asked to be on some committees, and I guess I impressed the right people, and here I am, shaking hands and taking business cards at airport association meetings. So that's been really exciting for me, and I'm looking forward to see what comes next. In this role. I'm much younger than my, the former president, which I think is, making me feel like I have some big shoes to fill. But I think that I could do it. Something that Brandon and I were just talking about a few minutes ago was how the aviation community really is supportive of anyone that wants to join. There doesn't really seem to be any sort of like competition. Everyone really wants to see you excel in whatever career in the aviation world that you want to pursue. So I'm really excited, and I think this is going to be a great thing, knowing you and being able to kind of be on your podcast with you, and also sit around and talk about APG.
Absolutely. No, and big shout out to Captain Jeff and the APGers for, it's a big community, and it spreads into all kinds of other little communities, but at the end of the day, we're all in this aviation thing together.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I totally agree with you. Everybody's always willing to help. Everybody's always willing to, we all want to be the best pilot or the best controller, the best whatever, but at the end of the day, we're all in this thing together, and helping somebody get where they need to go is the most important part. So anyway, big shout out to them. Absolutely. I'm glad we got to do this. And I feel like we probably have not heard the last from you on this podcast.
Absolutely not.
And your predecessor, we're definitely going to do an interview with her too. So you guys out there can look forward to a great interview that's going to center around women in aviation as an organization and the great work that they do. Yeah.
Actually, something that's fun and exciting coming up. Not quite. There's an event in September that I'd love for any Southern Californians to know about. It's an awesome event put on by Women in Aviation International, but each chapter throws their own event, and it's different everywhere you go. Ours last year was for girls ages 8 to 16, all around the San Diego and Los Angeles area, and they actually got to meet a bunch of the Blue Angels. This year we are doing an event actually here at the Palomar Airport. It's September 23rd, and the whole goal of the day is to educate young girls about what it's like to be in the aviation community, what it's like to be a airplane mechanic or a pilot, or even a flight attendant. We have so many women from all across the board in our chapter. So we're going to be holding it's a few hour event, September 23rd, and if you go to www.waisandiego.org, you can sign up if you're interested in joining, and it's a totally free event, so it should be pretty fun. We've got a lot of exciting stuff planned that I can't spill the beans about details, but I can definitely say it'll be an awesome time. So more on that later on, but I just thought I'd give a little shout out to that.
Absolutely, it sounds great. And actually, I think one of my coworkers, one of my controller friends, actually usually does a little gig at that too. So maybe that'll happen this year too.
Yeah, I hope so. We just actually had a meeting about it tonight before I got here, and I'm really I'm excited. It's going to be a great day. That's awesome. So I'll tell you what, if people are wanting to get on that early, how can they get in touch with you? You can email me directly. I think that would be the best way to contact me. My email is waisd.prez@gmail.com. waisd.prez@gmail.com. My name is Serena, and you can email me directly, and I can give you all the proper links to get signed up for that day. Sounds good. And if anybody has any issue getting to it that way, then hit me up at the show either way, the website, email, send me an audio feedback, whatever you need, and I'll of course point you in the right direction. I think it's going to be a really fun thing to do. Thank you very much. All right, well, this has been awesome. We have not heard the last from you for sure, and I think we're just going to get back to hanging out. What do you think? Hanging out and finishing our beers. All right, there you go. All right, shout out APG community, and thanks for listening. We'll see you guys later. All right, that one was really fun. Now, before we finished up, I'm not sure if you guys noticed, but there's been a giant elephant in the room this entire time, and he goes by the name of ATC Privatization. I get asked a lot how I feel about this, and the answer is, I don't know. Now, like Bill said earlier in his interview, this topic comes up from time to time, and each time the terms are a little bit different. Right now, it's too soon for me to say for sure, and I'm actually in a bit of a precarious position, so I've decided not to go on a big rant on this topic, but suffice to say, our union, NATCA, generally supports the current bill.
And since it more or less meets their 4 core principles for ATC reform. And you can check out the NATCO website for more on that. And on the other side, General Aviation pretty much is completely against it. And again, I'm caught in the middle. So this whole thing's moving along really, really quickly. So instead of me just trying to record and podcast about it, which would result in horribly outdated info for you, why don't you follow us on Twitter? It's at Podcast on a Plane. And you can like our Facebook page, which is, of course, Podcasting on a Plane. And there I'll be able to post articles a lot more frequently. And so for now, I'm going to leave you with just a recommendation for a great read on this topic, and it's really, really relevant here. The link will be in the show notes, but the article is by one of my all-time favorite aviation writers and an aviation journalist legend, Dick Collins. And it's titled 8/3/1981, The Day the FAA Disappeared. And it's a really neat first-hand account of what it was like to operate in the ATC system during the PATCO strike. Please, please, please go check this article out. It's really good. So, that's all I have for you this time. Your frequency change is approved until next time, and report back on this frequency for the next episode. Good day. The Podcasting on a Plane podcast is presented for entertainment purposes only. My comments and those of my guests, the website's content, and any of the social media, etc. are not part of my official responsibility as a controller or an FAA employee. The views and opinions you hear on the podcast are mine and those of my guests, and not necessarily that of the FAA. There is no nexus between Podcasting on a Plane and the FAA. Also, while I am a CFI, I'm not your CFI. Nor am I your mechanic, your doctor, your shrink, or your spouse. This podcast is presented for entertainment, camaraderie, and fun, but is in no way, shape, or form professional advice. It's not legal counsel, and it's definitely not flight instruction. If you are in need of professional advice, get some from somewhere more appropriate than a podcast, no matter how good this one may be.